It's time for the Wrestlecast on the Sportscast Media Network. Join us now for a discussion on wrestling at the high school and college levels. Here's Gage Gill, Shane Barron, and Danny Davis.
Welcome to the Wrestlecast. We know there are 4 million podcasts available, and we're glad you chose ours. This is the Wrestlecast on the Sportscast Media Network. Join us now for a discussion on wrestling at the high school and college levels. Here's Gage Gill and Shane Barron. Guys, how you doing?
Doing well.
I'm doing great. I feel like I've accomplished everything I need to in life. Shane Sparks has tweeted at me, so I'm feeling good.
Yeah, okay. Did you guys have a good week?
Had a pretty good week. We had the week off. We had spring break here at New London, and unfortunately, I had to spend a lot of that time just getting my life organized, which maybe is a full-time job that'll never be accomplished. But we didn't get to go anywhere or anything like that. So, but I needed the rest.
Gage, how about you?
So my cousin texted me last weekend and said, "Hey, we're going to have a pool thing going for the Big Tens, to throw in a couple dollars, blah, blah, blah." Ended up being 87 guys in it.
Oh, my.
And so I lost $20, but I did finish in the top half. So that's got to count for something.
Is that the one you're trying to get us involved in?
Yeah, I think I sent it to you.
I'm glad I didn't do it.
Oh, no, I think I sent you guys the one for the NCAAs.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, but that was for the Big Ten. So I think I've learned from my mistakes. I'm going to have you guys on this show try to help me to somehow put my Iowa and Big Ten bias aside and pick better, because I think that's my problem. But other than that, it's a pretty good week.
Right. Did you guys have a point-counterpoint this week?
We got a couple things we can talk about.
Let's do it.
I'm going to enter a point-counterpoint with Gage here. I've been watching a lot of wrestling this year, as you have too, and at least at the collegiate level, what do you think about a 9-minute match? And I'll take the point that there should be a 9-minute match, and here I'll go. They're so evenly matched now at the collegiate level, and we're going to go through rankings, we're going to go through seedings, we're going to go through all this stuff. Basically, 4 through 16 is a coin flip anymore, so maybe those extra 2 minutes per match will kind of let the cream rise to the top a little bit more.
All right, Gage?
The reason to be against it would just be, riding time. It would change the whole sport. If you're a good rider, you could ride somebody out, lock up that point. The strategy would change. I don't know if those are negative things or not, but I don't know if the guys would have the gas. The end of it just might not be as exciting. Just those 2 more minutes, guys might just get gassed, but it would definitely change it.
All right. Well, thank you, guys. We had talked earlier. Gage, you wanted to know, do you want to do the number thing right now? Did you want to ask about that? Let's do it.
You want me to go first?
Why don't you tell us kind of what this is about?
Okay. So we're going to throw a number out there, and I'll give a hint on mine. If we want to give hints, that might help. You would have figured it out.
And this is any random number.
So this is any number that has to do with wrestling, and my number has to do with the wrestling, where we are in the year, okay? So my number is 1967, has something to do with wrestling, and I'll give the hint, has something to do with Big Ten wrestling. So see if you guys have any ideas what 1967 would indicate.
Okay, 1967 was the year Shane Barron was born, and he is a follower of the Big Ten wrestling scene on the Wrestlecast, and I'll take any prize money that is associated with that.
Hey, that's pretty good.
What number did you choose, Shane?
Well, I'm going to be honest with you, Danny. I completely rehashed and hashed some thoughts in my head. 1967 is going to stump me, so I'm kind of stalling for time a little bit. But I'll throw 1972 out for you, which I think you'll get with a little bit of thinking, but maybe it's not as obvious as I thought.
Does it have to do with a coach?
It does.
Okay. No, what's your number?
I was going to say 1985.
Does yours have to do with the coach? 1985?
Okay. No.
Okay. So I'll give a hint on mine. Oh, you want to take a shot at it, either one of you?
I need a hint.
Okay. It has to do with the Big Ten, and it has to do with Iowa. Something started in 1967 that's continued through this year. So we're at least 1967 through 2024. And I got this idea from the Big Ten wrestling tournament.
Is it anything to do with Gary Kurtelmeyer?
I don't think so. What'd he do? Tell me that.
He was, and I'm probably going to get some hate mail on this one, but he was the coach at Iowa before Gable.
So this is more about wrestlers and and an accomplishment that you want to have. And it has to do with the Big Ten tournament. And it's happened every year for the Iowa program since 1967. A Big Ten wrestler since 1967 has accomplished this every single Big Ten tournament.
They've gotten bonus points in every match.
You're getting close. Think of a bigger accomplishment that would culminate Sunday evening or the last session.
They won the finals by pin.
You're getting closer. Has to do with the finals.
A Big Ten wrestler in the finals since 1967. This has happened.
An Iowa wrestler.
An Iowa wrestler has. I need help.
Since 1967, at least one Iowa wrestler has made the finals in the Big Ten tournament every single year. So if Zach Glazier would have lost his overtime match to Jackson Smith in the semifinals last weekend, Iowa's streak since 1967 would have been broken. So every year you've been alive, Shane, Iowa has had a Big Ten tournament finalist.
That's a lot of finalists.
That's
I was
crazy.
going to say, I've been alive a long time. My body will tell you.
I don't know. I just thought that was a pretty cool streak.
Well, I'm referencing my wrestling Bible, so to speak. And did you know in 1967 who the NCAA champion was? Somebody, Big Ten, but you'd probably be shocked at who. And not only that, you'd be shocked at who the runner-up was.
1967 champion.
1967 NCAA champion team.
Champion team?
Yeah,
Oklahoma.
Big Ten team.
Oh. Purdue.
Michigan. No, did Michigan
Nope,
come
keep
later?
Keep going.
Michigan State.
Michigan State. Remember how big late 1960s sports was at Michigan State? Bubba Smith, football, all that stuff. And the runner-up that year was Michigan.
Okay.
So your first appearance for in 1950, Northern Iowa was the team. But I was going to say 1970, 1969, Iowa State goes back-to-back. Oklahoma State jumps in there.
Wait, okay, I want to guess yours now.
Okay.
Is 1972 the first time Iowa won
No.
a championship? Okay.
No.
It was 72, right? Your number?
Yeah, 1972. I will say that Michigan State was runner-up that year.
It's a coach thing, though?
It is a coach thing.
I'm going to need more hints.
1972, 2 years after something happened that probably changed wrestling forever.
You stumped me.
Stumped you completely? God, I thought you just jumped down my throat. How easy that was. Maybe it's just easy for me. 1972, Dan Gable wins the gold medal at the Munich Olympics after 2 years of losing to Larry Owings. 1970 has his streak stopped. 1970s when people started checking out wrestling in a televised way. Who's this Gable guy? And then the Olympics, from what I understand, I wasn't 5 years old with my television set watching it, but the history I've been reading on Dan Gable was he was so impressive and so good. It was the Gable way, and he had the Russians just marveling at how skilled his technique was, and that's why he probably changed wrestling forever at that 1972.
Good number. That was a good one. All right, what do you got, 1985?
1985 is what I chose.
Can you give us some hints?
A hint of 1985. Spectator.
Spectator. It's the first sellout of something?
No. No.
Does it have to do with college wrestling?
Yes.
Well, that takes out Hulk Hogan and Mr. T, combining
And the Iron Sheik.
and combining forces there. 1985.
Nope.
First time somebody won some kind of championship.
Nope.
Spectator.
Spectator.
Will you elaborate on that?
Does it have to do at all? Oh, Spectator. Oh,
Yeah.
I need elaboration.
Watching, first time.
Is this a Danny Davis life event specifically?
Only the Davis family tree would know this.
Oh, okay. One more guess.
You watched something specifically.
There you go.
Okay. You watched, it was your first Iowa wrestling experience.
Yes, 1985.
Is that true?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Nice.
Yeah. That's all I had. So.
Well, I'm going to give you a little help on 1985. Do you know who the NCAA champion was that year at 126.
Oh, I used to know that.
It was Barry Davis.
Barry, that's probably why I watched.
And the only reason that story has any resonance with me at all is I was a high school senior in 1985. Yeah. We had a teacher that was an Iowa graduate, and we asked her, how hard is it to get Iowa wrestling tickets? Because we knew they were good. I said, you can just walk up back in 1985, and this was B.J. Armstrong basketball, and, and all that
Brad
stuff.
Bowhouse,
yeah, all that.
Yeah.
Hard to get tickets for that. And football was 1985 was obviously Rose Bowl stuff, and so I was thinking of going to Iowa. But anyway, to deal with wrestling, Barry Davis was the only name I recognized from the wrestling standpoint at that time as a student in high school. And he apparently got so dejected and so depressed right before NCAAs that Gable was driving all over Iowa City to find him.
Oh.
He had missed some curfew, missed some deadline or something. He'd basically thrown in the towel. He'd lost a match maybe or something. He was just down in the dumps. And Gable found him at the Econo Foods, which I bought most of my cheap hot dogs from when I was a student at Iowa. But found him at Econo Foods, and he had a cart full of junk food. He had really just thrown in the towel. And Gable talked him off the ledge, took him to the Nationals, and he ends up winning the whole thing.
Really?
He changed his mindset. Only thing of 1985 I could point to, but I thought if some of my friends out there, Steve Gibson, I know you're listening, if some of my friends out there would chime in and kind of validate that story, I'd appreciate it.
So I have another number that goes with yours, and I won't make you guys guess this one. Since 1990, so 33 straight times, Iowa has had an NCAA finalist. 47 of the last 48 NCAA tournaments dating back to 1975, so Barry Davis would be a part of that. Iowa's had an NCAA finalist. This year, the highest seed of anybody wrestling for Iowa is 3.
Right.
So that streak is in major jeopardy. Could Drake Ayala or, Real Woods, those are probably the top 2 best chances. Could they make the finals? They're definitely good enough. Real Woods was in it last year, but yeah, that's a pretty cool streak. So yeah, cool number.
Well, that could be our segue into kind of getting into some NCAA opening round action. I'm going to take the Iowa perspective since we kind of took a step forward on that. The brackets are out, and people who listen to this broadcast, I'm sure, kind of know who's up against who, and I'm just going to kind of give my take on Iowa at first. Okay, so at 125, we'll have Drake Ayala in a match featuring Elijah Griffin of CBU, which I'm going to assume is Cal Baptist. Ayala, from my perspective, will win this first round handily, and then you can throw any name in a hat after that, and it's almost. I asked my son the other day about the NCAA brackets for men's basketball, and I said, I wonder how you do on a bracket if you just flip coins. I think the 125 division is almost of that caliber. Ayala could be in the finals.
Yeah.
He could also lose in the second round.
He looks really good lately. For whatever reason, I think the style between him and D'Agostino it's not meshing well. I think he's so defensive, the fear of the beard, so defensive that he lost to him, but then wrestled all the way back and beat Matt Ramos. So yeah, I'm with you though. It's 125 is the wild, wild west.
125 is
Ayala. I think you got to throw his name in the hat. He's going to have a shot if he wrestles well.
We did a 125 preview a long time ago about Jacob Camacho of North Carolina State, who was ranked number 1. He's just an afterthought now. I mean, what the heck happened to him? And these the number 1 seed is Braden Davis of Penn State, which we'll kind of elaborate on later. Ayala beat him. Ayala's beaten. He lost to Ramos in, was it sudden victory or just the last second?
Yeah, it was sudden victory.
Yeah, I mean.
He's lost to Ramos and D'Agostino twice, and those are his losses.
Yeah, and if somebody knocks off those guys.
But he's beat Ramos too. He beat him at the Big Tens for third. So they've split.
There you go. I mean.
So he's in the mix.
Well,
he looks good right now.
Speaking of in the mix, I mean, Brody Teskey will be the 15 seed at 133. Here I have to against Derek Cardinal, College.
SDSU.
Jackrabbits. Yeah,
yep.
Jackrabbits. Okay, so Teskey was the 14 seed at the Big Tens, and whether that was a slap in the face that resonated with him or something, he wrestled really well at the Big Tens. I don't see him on the podium, but I see him in the blood round.
So this is how I understand that, to your point, Shane, that they had Schriever in the lineup, who we think will be the guy of the future. Schriever and Teskey look about the same this year. Schriever's looked better, maybe most of it. But for whatever reason, Teskey was the alternate, and they threw him in. And if you're the alternate, you automatically get that seat. But even if he wasn't the alternate, he couldn't have been seated that high. He didn't wrestle half the matches, and he lost quite a few.
So would have been seated 10 or 11 anyway.
Yeah, he's a wild card.
He's a complete wild card. I think his senior status, leadership, this is the final go-round, will kind of kick in. He'll wrestle well. I hope I'm wrong. I just don't see him as an All-American. And 141 is Real Woods against Clay Carlson, also of South Dakota State. Woods did wrestle seemingly better. I thought it was maybe a Bo Bartlett thing, but it turned out Jesse Menendez of Ohio State kind of took him to task a little bit. I would say anybody in that 1, 2, 3, 4 category of 141 could be the national champion. And this, I don't think Real Woods is going to be off his game. I do see him as definitely an All-American. I do see him as in that upper echelon. Whether he'll be in the finals, I don't. If I had to pick one person for the finals out of this whole list, I'm actually not going to pick him. Can you guess who I'm going to pick?
Well,
to keep that streak going?
I was going to say it'll be him or Bartlett for the semis if it plays out. Give me a second. You keep going, and let me think about that one.
At 149, Caleb Ratchie, Jordan Williams of Oklahoma State. That's a 13-20 matchup. I'm going to go with Ratchie in the first round after that. And not because of seedings. I think Ratchie's probably a little underrated. I do see Ratchie as an All-American. Jared Franick against Joey Blaze. Franick disposed of him when they met in the duels. I remember that. It was a tough match, though. Joey Blaze from Purdue is not... Anybody in the Big Ten is going to be a tough match. So that's a tough 10-23 hookup. But I also see Franick emerging from that first round. Then it's anybody's guess. I'm going to go with Franick as an All-American, though. Mike Caliendo, number 6 against number 27, Blaine Brenner of Minnesota. I see Caliendo finding a way to emerge from that one. 174, I think Patrick Kennedy is a little under-seeded, if you will. He's ranked, he's seeded 12th. At 174, he meets up with North Carolina's Tyler Eichens. I see Kennedy as surprising some people. He might be this year's, Nelson Brands, kind of that guy that just finds a way. A lot of 3-1 victories, a lot of sudden victories. I see him in the top 6 for some reason. Zach Glazier is at 197, and his only losses this year have been to AJ Ferrari, and he ended up getting the victory in the Soldier Salute. And the other 2 losses were to Aaron Brooks, maybe one of the top 10 wrestlers of all time. And Aaron Brooks is going to that, going to go try for that 4-time NCAA championship. I see Zach Glazier as making the finals.
I was going to actually guess that.
Yeah.
And I'm not just saying that. I think part of it is a lot of those top guys seem to be avoiding Aaron Brooks. Mm-hmm. We've talked about on this show, that's the weakest weight class, nothing against Glazier, in the Big Ten, I think, by far. And there's been some big-time wrestlers who have bumped up to heavyweight this year, too, just with some of those guys vacating, who've graduated over the last couple of years. So I don't think that's a stretch, to be honest with you. I like that idea.
I think Zach Glazier's story is a good one. He waited his turn, bided his time, wrestled against Warner, who made the finals last year. So, the argument of iron sharpens iron is seemingly playing out. And I think he's going to be in the finals. I hope I'm right on that. Bradley Hill at 285. That's a 25. He's right. He's seeded 25th. His first matchup will be Owen Trefan of North Carolina State. Again, I hope I'm wrong. I see him as the only loser of the first round for Iowa.
I heard a cool story last weekend how I didn't realize Bradley Hill and Ben Keeter run the same traveling wrestling team. They've been wrestling partners since they were in junior high. So, and now they drill, in that Iowa room. And so I thought that was pretty cool.
Have you heard anything about, I don't know if they get referees involved or anything like that, but is Hill still, I assume Hill beats Keeter head to head in the Iowa wrestling room, but I'm not sure about that anymore. Have you heard anything along those lines of?
No, I doubt.
You doubt that?
I doubt it. I think they just redshirted Keeter and Gabe Arnold. Yeah, they're going to have a different team next year, but I think they could have a pretty good team. But I can go on to Iowa State if you want.
Yeah.
So Iowa State, they were the Big 12 champions. And it was the first time they were Big 12 champions since Cale Sanderson was there. They had a three-peat from 2007 to 2009. And it was a close race. They had 152.5. Oklahoma State, 141.5. SDSU beat Missouri, who Missouri, is up there, 115. So it was a pretty good race. They had some champions in the Big 12 race. They had quite a few finalists. That Big 12 is pretty loaded. So at 125, Patrick McKee is the 9 seed from Minnesota. And so Iowa State has Kyson Tarakina. That's one of those weird ones where, and we're going to talk about this, I think, here in a bit, but where seeding and rankings are sometimes two different things. And McKee has been ranked very high, but he's seeded 9. So that's not a good matchup for Iowa State. Evan Frost right now has wrestled really well. He's the 8 seed for the Cyclones at 133. Braden Basil for Army. So, seeding-wise, they're looking good there. 141, Anthony Enjamandita has looked good. Jordan Heyman from Michigan State. That 5 seed, he's a guy at 141, that could make a run there. Should be some good matches in the quarters. Casey Swiderski at 149. He's the 8 seed, and there's 3 Iowa State Army matchups, which I thought was kind of weird. Kind of like there's 2 Iowa South Dakota State matchups. So Matthew Williams, the 25. So he's seeded well there. Cody Chittum. Interesting story. We've talked about him on this show. He was at Oklahoma State. He's an Iowa guy. Came to Iowa, was there for a year. The word on the street is he didn't really get along with the Ferrari family. When they brought them in, he transferred the next day to Iowa State. So he's a 14 seed, but he was the Big 12 runner-up. He's a guy that if you're playing in these fantasy wrestling pools and you get a couple wild cards, take Cody Chittum. I have him, but then I've dropped him and I've added him because I'm struggling picking an Iowa State guy in one of my pools. But I could see him making a run to kind of like you said, maybe to the blood round at least. Mm-hmm. 165 is interesting. So David Carr, former NCAA champion, who lost to O'Toole from Missouri. But here's the thing about 165. David Carr, O'Toole, who beat him, Carter Starachi, who injury defaulted to a 9 seed, and Mekhi Lewis, who's also a former champ, are all on the same side of the bracket. So you have 4 titles all on the same side there. No, you have 5 titles on the same side of the bracket. Starachi's won 3, David Carr, and then Lewis. So only one of those guys is making the finals. Only 2 of them can make the semis. So, David Carr, he's 429 matchup in that first round. He should score some points, should be an All-American. But he's just in a really tough bracket on the really tough side of the bracket. MJ Gayton, it's another Army Iowa State matchup, 15-18. I don't know. It's a coin flip. Will Feldkamp is the 17 going up against Princeton's Nate Dugan at 184. It's a coin flip match. I don't know. I'm sure he's looked really good. Iowa State's been wrestling well lately. And then the heavyweight. This is probably the Cyclones' best chance, better than David Carr, to make the finals. Younger Bastida He'll take on Bennett Faber in his first round. Bastida's the 2 seed. He's then have to, when you play like pig and you have to prove it. I mean, there's going to be a rematch, and he's going to have to prove it, taking on Rocky Elam again. But, you were talking about Greg Kirkfleet and thinking that he's probably the best wrestler, but these 2 guys are both really exciting heavyweights. I mean, they move well, they're explosive. When you see dudes that weigh almost 300 pounds who are just explosive athletes who can do backflips and splits and stuff like that, I mean, it's just exciting. So I think that's probably the Cyclones' best chance for the finals.
I'm going to throw some more names out at you for 165. Mitchell Messenbrink, Penn State, and Dean Hamady at 165.
Messenbrink's the 2 seed, right? And Hamady's the 5?
Something like that.
Hamady from Wisconsin and Messenbrink from Penn State.
Yeah, Messenbrink, I think, is 3. But anyway, that just validates your point more. I think Keegan O'Toole will probably win. And David Carr will probably, at the 4 seed, have to meet Keegan O'Toole probably earlier than he wants in the semis. But that could be your national championship right there.
I mean,
1 and 4.
Do you think it's safe to say 165 is probably the toughest weight class and 125 is maybe the most open weight class?
I'd say that's safe to say, yes. And I'm going to go with Bastida as your national runner-up as well. I think Kirk Levitt probably a little too skilled. Bastida's got his senior year coming up. It seems like the heavyweights, you just kind of have to, after Gable Steveson, okay, now the best junior seems to win the next year.
You're talking about Messenbrink, right?
Yeah.
So here's the crazy thing about Penn State. So Messenbrink is a redshirt freshman. He was a Wisconsin several-time state champ. Braden Davis is a true freshman from Penn State at 125. So it's not like these guys just have a bunch of dudes who've been in the room. I mean, they have, Bernie Truax. He was the transfer from Cal Poly. You have a redshirt freshman, a true freshman. You have guys that have been there. I mean, they're just loaded up and down all sorts of years. But, yeah, there should be some good matchups. But that kind of brings me to seedings, if we can transition to seeding right now, Danny. So
good. You bet.
So you guys brought up Messenbrink. He was the 3 seed at the Big Tens. He's the 2 seed nationally. Okay, so I went through and I picked some weird discrepancies, okay? McKee is the 9 seed nationally. He's ranked 3rd. Vitale from Cornell, the 6 seed. He's ranked 3rd. Navy has Conderhart. He's the 11 seed. He's the 5th ranked wrestler in the nation. David Carr's ranked 2nd, seeded 4th. Patrick Kennedy from Iowa, ranked 7th, seeded 12th. Cornell's Foca is the 14 seed. He's ranked 6th in the nation. Rocky Elam, which I just love Rocky. That's maybe just a great wrestling name. He's the 12 seed, ranked 8th. And then there's a guy from Bennington University. He's the 16 seed, but ranked 27. So I guess when we're looking at seeds, part of it is they look at, you get points for certain things. So head-to-head matchups, what's your record, what's your winning percentage. They look at, you get points if you were a former NCAA qualifier, if you were a former, place winner, stuff like that. Should it just be the same thing? Like, should we just do like a mock every week from the year, just do a mock tournament, and whoever would be the 1 seed, they're just ranked 1? I mean, why even have rankings? I don't know. Or am I just on my own going down a rabbit hole I just need to crawl back out of?
Well, when you read these updated press releases and whatnot, you'll see 4 numbers with, what is it called, a backwards slash mark or something, indicating that there's 4 different organizations that are seeding or that are ranking these guys. And sometimes
what are those? Do you know, Sean?
Oh, one is Win Magazine, and
I think one's WrestleMat, right?
Yeah, one's WrestleMat. That's good. Maybe Flow Wrestling has one. But anyway, there's 4.
Yeah,
and those numbers can sometimes fluctuate pretty dramatically. One has them as 12 and the other has them as 22 or something like that. Now, that's probably more for the fans just to kind of Oh, well, he's 22, so he should beat 21. But anyway, or he shouldn't beat 21. But anyway, I know that we've had some interviews with some ADs and some wrestling coaches throughout the year. These seeding meetings can really take a long time before these high school tournaments. Can you imagine what a seeding meeting at a NCAA championship would look like? I don't know what it looks like, but I mean, you're talking about...
Looks like a hat with a bunch of names.
Well, that might end up being the way they have to do it. These guys are so evenly matched anymore. You had your first one that you mentioned, McKee. If you were to say he would lose in the second round, I wouldn't be stunned. And if you were to say that he was going to be the national champion, I wouldn't be stunned. They're that close. They're that tightly matched, and it'd be almost impossible to seed it completely. There's going to be some NCAA brackets released here in a couple minutes, and there will be an hour show on ESPN about how, well, why didn't you have this? And it's almost like you mentioned earlier, Gage. It's a rabbit hole that you can't get out of anymore. What is accurate? What isn't accurate? Did he have an off day? Things like that.
Do you think that maybe some of the seedings are made that way to cause a little bit of drama?
I don't know. It's from a basketball standpoint, yes.
Yeah.
As somebody who's watched NCAA basketball since I could eat a popsicle in front of my... Do we have a 19-inch TV? Anyway, but yes, those are purposely matched. They will... the women's seedings will come out, and if there's a way to put Iowa versus LSU together, they will find a way. Or Haley Van Lith doesn't like such and such from another team. We know about Iowa, but they will find a way to
So you
match
think
them
that
together.
happens with wrestling too?
I'm going to guess that it's not as blatant as in basketball, but I think...
But it does sell tickets, and it gets the media talking, and that generates advertising dollars. And
you can tell just by watching a few YouTube broadcasts, after you watch ours, that people will talk about second and third round matches and this guy versus... And there's history involved. And speaking of... I'm just going to... This 165... Did you know, Gage and Danny, that Keegan O'Toole and Mitchell Messenbrink were both trained at the Askren Academy in Wisconsin? I mean, they're buddies. So
it makes sense. I think it's a tight-knit community too, but kind of going back to what you were talking about with the drama part of it. So, it's very similar, but with a lot of differences to basketball, which I think, a lot of people are familiar with for the NCAAs. You win your conference tournament, you're an automatic qualifier. But what they do in wrestling is they release before the conference tournament how many automatic spots there are. So like in the Big Tens, in a given weight class, there might be 9 automatic spots. So if you get 9th, you're in. That might not have helped your team much at Big Tens, but you're in. But there are some at-large spots. And I think that's where a lot of the drama is coming from this year. So I looked up the requirements for an at-large spot, and here's what you got. You have to have a 700 win percentage, be top 33 in the RPI, just like there is for every other sport, there's an RPI. You have to be in the top 33 coaches ranking. You have to have a 700 win percentage against all competition, 1 win against a wrestler receiving an automatic bid, and then qualifying. You have to have 1 of the automatic qualifications. Head-to-head competition, you have to have 1 against 25, or you have to has to be 25%. Quality wins 20%. Coaches rank 15%. RPI 10%. Win percentage 10%. It gets crazy. Like, what does all that stuff mean? So here's how it comes into play in this tournament for the most dramatic at-large selection. Carter Starace. He didn't wrestle 1 match of the Big Ten. He's the 3-time defending champ. He had a 74-match winning streak before he medically forfeited his 2 matches at Big Tens. Okay, but he's the 9 seed on that really tough side that we were kind of talking about in the NCAA tournament. Will he even wrestle? So Penn State and Carter Strachey are acting like he's going to wrestle. But if you look at, let's just go down the Twitter rabbit hole quick. Right when he forfeited his matches, he was posting some things like, on to the next chapter of my life. So is he kind of giving away like he's done? Because he hurt his knee right before Big Tens. But now he's saying like, I want to wrestle everybody. Is that just Penn State trying to make it seem like he'll wrestle? Regardless, if he doesn't wrestle, he took a spot away from somebody. However, at the same time, who cares? If you're trying to win an NCAA tournament, if you're Penn State, you might as well take a spot away from somebody. So I don't know. Will he wrestle? Will he not? I think this is where the other thing comes in. One other time under Kelly Sanderson, a similar situation happened, but the guy didn't wrestle a match. He went to nationals and he just medically forfeited because he wasn't able to. So will Carter Strachey wrestle or not? I don't know, but it's kind of the same like you were saying in basketball. It's the same drama. Now you have the last 4 in, the first 4 out, the next 4 out. They're just trying to figure out who belongs and who doesn't. But at least with wrestling, you do have some criteria. But that will be a huge focal point of the tournament. Will Strachey actually wrestle? And if he does, will he be good? But he is the 9 seed because of that.
Do you think, since we have a little Spencer Lee background to go by with Strachey, do you think that he will wrestle as far as he can go? I think I have no proof of this. I've never read anything that was solid and validated or anything like that, but it just appears because of Spencer Lee being so dominant in his Olympic preparation. I mean, he hasn't really been challenged in his Olympic preparation, that he just wasn't right last year. And being Spencer Lee, they thought, a 75% Spencer Lee can still win the national title. Well, obviously he didn't. And then he medically forfeited the last 2 matches. Do you think Penn State would try something like that? But this weight class is probably very tough. This isn't a game, I know that. But,
right. I think it makes sense. I mean, I guess from Penn State, you got to look at it 2 ways. What's best for your guy? You want to get the individual accolades, but you also want the team accolades. So I'm glad you brought that up, Shane. So going into the Big Tens, Penn State was projected to win by 52.5 points. Carter Strachey didn't wrestle a match, and they won by 47. You have a guy who's a 3-time defending champ, who's won 74 straight matches. He didn't wrestle at all. He didn't get 1 point for him, and they still won by 47. So if you're asking, can Penn State win as a team without him? Absolutely. So I was looking at a simulator. Penn State is projected to win with 136 points. NC State's projected second with 83.
Wow.
And then it goes like this. Nebraska 58, Lehigh 57, Oklahoma State 55, Iowa State after that 53.5. Cornell and Arizona State tied for 52. Iowa in 9th with 49.5. But if you look at the difference between what's projected to be 9th and projected to be 3rd, it's 8.5 points. So basically NC State, who was actually ranked 2nd earlier in the year, is projected to finish 2nd. Penn State's projected to roll, and then 8 or 9 teams real tight for 3rd. And it is important to note, I think, for those teams, top 4 at nationals get a team trophy and bring one home.
So what was Penn State's percentage?
They were projected to score 136 points.
And North Carolina State was second?
83. So
wow,
over
that's a
50.
huge difference.
Right. So, I mean, from a team standpoint, it's crazy to say this. Penn State should win it without him, as long as things go their way. From a Carter Strachey point, it's kind of like Spencer Lee, though. It stinks that he got pinned, by Ramos, and that's how he ended his Iowa career. Mm-hmm. So I think if he can go, I mean, he's going to be done here. And if he is hurt, he's not going to be able to go wrestle anywhere else until he gets repaired. Yeah. So if you're him and you're Penn State, why would you not just give it a shot if he's healthy enough to give it a shot, So I don't know. I think it'll be interesting.
The only thing I can point to is kind of what you just said was, do you want your last Spencer Lee's career is unrivaled by most. I mean, just what a great career. But the last image is his mom breaking her glasses and him getting pinned. And frankly, after watching that match a couple of times on YouTube and whatnot, he was probably pinned 10 seconds or 5 seconds before they actually called it. They were probably giving him the benefit of the doubt.
They held it for quite some time.
Yeah, and that's the last image we get of Spencer Lee as in an Iowa singlet, is him getting stuck by a guy who he stuck earlier in the year. No, not to, Ramos is a good wrestler. He might win the national championship this year, but still. Just real quick, there's lots of things we can chat about. They got. I go through this ranking system that you alluded to. Penn State 136, NC State 83, and then Nebraska 58. Now, when you go back to the dual matchups this year, Iowa's only lost to Michigan and Penn State. Now, Penn State is just a different level, but Iowa's only lost to Michigan. They looked horrible doing so. Michigan's 11th in this point system.
Nope.
I think the NCAA is just going to have to, and it has to do with individual matchups and who's hurt, and I get it. But this point system, it just favors Penn State too much. They should, and Penn State would win a head-to-head dual championship too. But if you're a program that's trying to build, like, we'll just throw Lehigh out there. You can get a lot better recruits, I would think, if you could point to the fact that you're getting third in the national dual tournament. They have to resurrect that somehow.
Yeah.
Virginia Tech, for example. Missouri, for example. Those are solid programs, but they're not those alpha programs we kind of mentioned before. But if you can point to the fact that you're a second or third ranked team in the national duels rather than the 11th, 12th, or 13th in the current system.
Right. It's two way different things. So, for instance, like Cam Buffington, if he goes and jumps 22.3 here next week in the long jump, and somebody else at that meet, jumps 22.1, those are two of the top jumpers in Iowa. But if it was head to head, you'd lose there. And I think that's the difference. Is it's the same sport, but it's two way different scoring systems head to head. So like Michigan, for instance, they were second in the Big Tens. Penn State had 170.5, Michigan 123.5, Nebraska 118, Iowa 110.5. So Michigan, who as a dual team beat Iowa, but really wasn't great in duels. They had a great Big Ten, but you look up and down their lineup, there's not a bunch of huge holes. And for Nebraska, I think the thing with them is they don't really have a bad guy on their team. There's not a spot where they're weak. So in a tournament setting, they're going to go score, and they have some guys who can score bonus. For Iowa, there's not a lot of bonus scorers.
No.
Penn State has winners and pinners, and all 10 guys are going to give anybody out there nationally, a really good match, if not beat you, more times than not. So I think that's a big thing. It's just Penn State's head and shoulders above everybody else right now. And Iowa, they definitely could make a run at a team trophy, which is top 4, but I think there's about 12 teams this year, and this is what makes this year so great in college wrestling. I think there's like 12 teams that could probably win a team trophy, and UNI is one of them. UNI in that simulation, I think, was somewhere between 12th and 15th, if I remember. So I just wrote down the top 10. But
15.
And, and they have Kekison, who's ranked number 1, and so they definitely have a shot.
Well, since you led us into there, let's look at UNI's opening round for the NCAAs. At 133, Julian Farber will face Nebraska's Jacob Van D. Van D is ranked 14th, or seeded 14th. Farber seeded 19th. You're going to have to give me one of those shock treatments every time I say seeding instead of ranking, and ranking versus seeding. But 141 is going to be my, from my UNI standpoint, my favorite one to watch. Cale Happel from Lisbon is seeded as 7th against Cleveland Belton of Oregon State, seeded 26th. Do I see him knocking off Woods or Bo Bartlett or any? No. Do I see him as 4th or 5th? Yes. I mean, that's not too much above his seeding line.
He's kind of like
good,
and he's kind of like Ramos. I mean, his background is in freestyle. I mean, he was ranked very high nationally as a freestyler when he was in elementary and in junior high. So he's one of those guys you got to be careful with. He can throw anybody on their back. So I'm excited for Cale Happel. And did you say he's from Lisbon?
Was I right?
Yeah.
That's right, isn't it?
Yeah.
Okay.
So, I mean, that's pretty cool, I think, for us as Eastern Iowa guys, just to see somebody like that have a shot at getting on the podium.
And he's got a brother.
Yeah. So Carter wrestled at Iowa.
Yes,
Yep.
Carter.
Yep.
And their dad, Dean, was also a great wrestler.
Yeah. There's a family of them. There's a younger Happel who wasn't as good, and I think he was still like a 4-time place winner. It's when
Lisbon's a hotbed for wrestling, man.
When you're in a family like that and you're the one who's not very good and you have 4 medals around your neck, your family's doing something right.
Who else? Morningstar, Scott Morningstar, and Ryan.
Yep.
From Lisbon.
Yeah, good tradition.
Yeah.
But sorry, keep going, Shane.
No, you're fine. Ryder Downey has seeded 5th. He's actually the second highest seeding that UNI features. He'll likely get through a couple of rounds. Jared Hill of Oklahoma is his first match at number 28. That's a 5:28 matchup. And then at 165, Jack Thompson qualified. He's 33rd seed, so we've already alluded to the fact that 165 might be the deepest and most loaded weight class of them all. So I hope he can beat Jake Logan, ranked 32, but the tournament probably will end soon after that for one of those two guys. Jared Sima, 174. He's got Harvard Philip Canigliaro of Harvard. But we're all going to be looking for UNI's Parker Keckeisen at 184, ranked first. From what I've seen, he should, frankly, get his hand raised in the finals. I see him as the national champion. And then Wyatt Vilker at 197 faces Rutgers' John Poznanski. Volker's the 19th seed. Poznanski, I hope I'm not butchering that too much, is seeded 14th. I'd like to see Volker get that first round match and see what he can do from there.
So we've talked about our three main Iowa schools. So I went down another rabbit hole, guys. So the top, I'm going to hide these so you can't see them. So I was looking at where are these guys that are making nationals, where are they coming from? So like where are they going to high school? Okay. So I have the top 5 states who've produced NCAA qualifiers.
Over the years or just
this year? So for this year. So the top 5 states of where our current 2024 NCAA qualifiers went to high school. So you want to take a crack at what those states are?
I'll go first.
Go ahead.
I'll take a shot at it.
Okay.
All right, we'll go with Iowa.
Don't tell the answers because I want to try this too.
Okay.
Okay. We'll go with Iowa, Pennsylvania, New Jersey, Wisconsin, and California.
Okay. In that order, like 1 through 5?
Yeah, in that order.
Okay.
I'll go with that.
All right.
Not in any order, but I'm going to say Oklahoma, Iowa, Pennsylvania would be an obvious choice. This year, let's see, Texas. I got one more.
Yep.
I'll say Ohio.
All right. So I'm going to give you guys one switcheroo. Iowa's not in it. I said that earlier. I lied to both of you. Just see if you go with Iowa. You might not even been listening to me. We were getting ready for the show. So if you took Iowa out, who would you put as your alternate, I guess, just to speak in
Missouri.
Okay.
I would throw in Ohio. I didn't mention Ohio.
All right. So number 1 is Pennsylvania, and it was number 1 by quite a bit. So you both got them. Number 2 was Ohio. And so you added that, Shane, but you guys both got that one. Number 3 was New Jersey. And Shane, you got that one. Number 4 was Illinois. Ooh. Neither one of you guys got that one. And
Makes sense.
it makes sense. I mean, it's a big state with a lot of population. It's just a basketball state, too. Seems like they produced a lot of basketball guys.
Yep.
And Shane, you did get the 5th one was California, which is interesting because you don't really think California wrestling, but it's such a big state. Wrestling's great out there too, and so Pennsylvania, Ohio, New Jersey, Illinois, California. And so then you go back to Penn State and you go, well, how the heck are they so good all the time? Well, they have the most qualifiers, so their state's great. Mm-hmm. They butt up to Ohio. New Jersey's the next state over, so they're just in this hotbed. And then if you can pick off this kid from Iowa or this kid from Wisconsin like they have, they're in the best place to recruit with unlimited resources, a great coach who is an Olympic gold medalist, undefeated in his own right. I mean, it's just like the stars have kind of aligned for them.
How is Oklahoma not in there?
Yeah, I mean, Oklahoma's not, Iowa's not. Yeah. And not to say that those states don't still have a lot of guys. I mean, I'm sure they do, but...
I'll say for Oklahoma, just a theory, haven't read anything on it, Oklahoma might be one of those states that they're so vested in Oklahoma State and Oklahoma football that some of those bigger, heavier weighted athletes just play football year round and don't really turn towards wrestling. That's just a guess.
I'll throw this out there. Oklahoma is in that area that they have quite a few junior colleges, and there's more D2s also. So I wonder if, some of those guys go there because I believe it was Oklahoma Baptist just won the D2 wrestling this last weekend championship. So I think that might be part of it is, like in a state like Iowa, I think Upper Iowa is the only D2 school. And then there's, of course, your D3s and your NAIAs, so maybe I don't know if that plays a part in it, since there's only 10 spots. There's some studs that go to Grandview every year, Well, look at your, what's the Meepo guy? I'm drawing a Swafford.
Yeah, Swafford.
I mean, he went and was a NAIA champion. He could have definitely been on a D1 program. He's good because he is now, but he wanted to be a standout for a couple of years rather than in the mix or maybe a reserve on a Big Ten team. So
and then the other Swafford went to Graceland. There was Shea and
no, Brennan went to Graceland.
It was Brennan. Okay.
Yeah. Because he was a national champ there.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
So I guess to kind of culminate this conversation a little bit, because this is the other big, scuttlebutt out there on the social medias, is Iowa not having their gambling guys. Is that an excuse or an explanation to why they got fourth at Big Tens and why they're coming in a simulator ninth? I'll let you go first, Shane, but Danny, feel free to weigh in. I mean, do you feel like that's just an excuse and they're just not as good as they should be, or do you feel like it's actually an explanation to they'd be in a better spot if they had those guys?
I'll say it's more of an excuse this time. Abe Assad at 184 would have been nice, and Aiden Riggins didn't quite, he didn't qualify for the NCAA, so I get that. But all the other replacements have shown their mettle. They're in the, top 10 rankings in most cases. I just watched a little Big Ten wrestling at a local restaurant. Every TV had it on, and nobody was really watching it. It just didn't feel like anybody in the whole restaurant felt that Iowa was going to win anything, and they kind of laid an egg, and it didn't feel right. It didn't look right. The other team seemed to be more aggressive. I don't know. I'll chalk that up as an excuse this time.
So
I think it had a factor. I think not only the distraction of it all, and these wrestlers couldn't practice, could they, with the team?
No.
Yeah. So.
Yes, they could.
Oh, okay.
They could practice. Sorry.
Could they? Okay.
I believe so.
Yeah, that's kind of up in the air. I'm kind of on the fence, I guess, with that. You have to factor in that it's a huge distraction. You're unsure of what your season's going to be. That has to, mess with your mind. That's aside from not being able to compete,
right?
Not being in the spot there, but who's to tell?
That whole gambling. I hope there's some people that are lawyering up a little bit. Mm-hmm. I mean, Noah Shannon for football is what strikes me.
Yeah,
that guy was probably going to be a late round pick. He's undersized at 6 foot, but he's a legit pro prospect on the defensive line. He would help a lot of teams. He would make some money in the NFL, and he just got his whole career destroyed.
Yeah.
I'm going to go with a little bit of both. So Iowa had 110.5, Penn State 170.5 at Big Tens. I think it's an excuse to say we would have competed with Penn State. I think it's pretty obvious we're not in their ballpark.
Right.
Now, explanation, it's an excuse any way you want to cut it. But if you did have those guys, so let's just go through them. Seabreck, I don't think Seabreck's a step up from Franek, assuming they're both at 157. If you have Nelson Brands, does he slide in there over Kennedy? Maybe. I think those guys are about the same. I don't really think you gain. I mean, Nelson Brands came on really strong at the end of last year, but his whole career's been winning,
2-to-1 matches.
2-to-1 matches at the very end. I mean, he's not a bonus point guy. Could he have been a little step up? I don't think he places higher than Kennedy did at Big Tens. And then you go Abe Assad. That's a spot that, Riggins was actually winning a match and got pinned, or he would have got the Hawks a few more points there at 184 at Big Tens. Assad would qualify for nationals unless something crazy happened. And so you look at Iowa was 7.5 points behind Nebraska. You throw Abe Assad in there. Is he good for 8 points at the Big Tens? I'd say probably. So I think Iowa moves up to third then. So let's say he scores 8 points exactly, 118.5. So now you're 5 points behind Michigan. Does Cassiope finish a little higher than Bradley Hill? Yes. He does. Cassiope could have been the runner-up at Big Tens, but you have three good guys there. I'd say he would be anywhere from runner-up to fourth, and so that would be better than Bradley Hill. Cassiope has a little more firepower for bonus points, so I say he gives the Hawks at least 6. So to me, if you have a different guy who's out from gambling at 84 and at heavyweight, you're the runner-up at Big Tens.
I know Tom Brands has, expressed his displeasure about this many times, but I don't think himself he's used it as an excuse, has he?
I don't think so. And I mean, you go down the line, Ayala was seated second, he got third. Teskey was seated 14th, he got fifth. Real Woods was he seated second or third going into Big Tens?
I think he was seated second.
So he got seated second, got third. Rachi didn't wrestle up to his seed by a couple. Franek hit right on his seed. Caliendo hit right on his seed. Kennedy, Glazier was seated third and got second. Hill, same thing. So really, there's not a spot where you're like, obviously Riggins didn't do very well, but he wasn't seated very high. There's not a spot where you're like, man, that guy really, crapped himself,
Well, I'm going to clarify my remarks. I had a brain cramp in giving this. I'm going to stick with my assessment that excuse, but I forgot about Cassiope completely. He would probably be ranked. Would it be fair to say he'd be ranked number 2 right now in the nation?
He could be.
He could be. So I forgot about Cassiope.
But I think though you're right. It is an excuse in the sense of I'm hearing it more. I mean, I'm hearing it for 2 reasons, and that's why I kind of explained it the way I did. Why'd Iowa get 4th? And then also, why'd we not beat Penn State? If you're talking Penn State, that's a 100% excuse.
Right.
Those guys don't make the difference.
Right.
Could Iowa have snuck out a second-place finish? It's not like we would have been on the heels of Penn State. It would have been Iowa, Michigan, Nebraska in the mix for second, like they were. So I don't know if that makes anybody feel any better about anything, but those guys would have helped, just not to the point where we're beating Penn State because Penn State dominated without Carter Starachi.
Was it 4 guys? Is that right?
Seabrook, Brands, Assad, Cassiope. Was there another one that I'm missing?
Swafford was in the mix.
Oh, he was part of it?
Yeah. I don't know the facts of that, but he really got screwed.
So if we took 5 spots away from Penn State and we had a healthy team, could we beat them? If they had the same situation, the gambling situation?
I guess it probably depends on who you take, but...
Well, after watching their 125 guy ascend all the way to number 1 and Mitchell Messenbrinker, we never even heard of 3 months ago, it was all the way up to... I think we're going back to our January discussions. Is Penn State just a different animal?
Right. Well, before we get out of here, I want to talk about the women's wrestling team. Iowa Hawkeye women's national champs. You guys been following that?
To the point where I wish there'd be a little more how do I want to say it? Fanfare, a little bit. I mean, they're national champs, but just something hollow. Feels a little hollow somehow. Not that I had anything to do with it, but the NCAA is not going to recognize it for the fact that there's so few participants, I guess. We're going to have a Lynette Woodard discussion 40 years from now. You know, is this the greatest women's wrestling team ever? Well, it doesn't count because we didn't have
sanctioned.
Yeah, we weren't. We didn't have the right paperwork done. I don't know. It's. I think it does prove that women's wrestling in general is taking a very, very important step towards really building upon something. I don't want to, you know, put the horse before the cart, whatever the cliche is, but. Will women's wrestling take the place of women's basketball as far as, not in Iowa, right. But just in general? Would women's wrestling ascend to that third spot of our hierarchy of college sports and what we watch? It's obviously football first, then men's basketball second, and in a lot of cases, women's basketball is third. Wrestling is third in most, venues. But would they ascend to that third spot? Interesting to see.
You mentioned being in the restaurant or whatever, and there was TVs up there, and no one was watching the Big Ten tournament, right? Yeah, and at this time of the year, we would probably be talking about that, and we'd probably be talking about football. We'd be talking about the men's basketball team, maybe not. But I just think this Caitlin Clark and the Iowa women's basketball team has just got everybody captivated that there's nothing else that they want to. I mean, what else could be as exciting as watching that? So that's where everybody's mind is right now. Gage?
Yeah, I think that the state of Iowa is doing all the right things. I mean, University of Iowa is kind of a pioneer of the Power Five, because there's not a lot of Power 5 women's wrestling programs. So if you want it sanctioned, it's kind of how anything else works. One guy does it, then another. High school wrestling in Iowa's big, and then let's give us some credit. I mean, we've had some girls wrestling coaches and wrestlers on here, but you see these programs growing. Mm-hmm. So I think it's a matter of time before it gets sanctioned. And once you do that, now it'll get some TV time, because everything does. I mean, for the championships, all the NCAAs get some little TV slot, and that could lead to bigger ones. And I think they have to just stay creative. I don't remember if I brought this up or not, but, when Iowa is wrestling Penn at home, and nobody cares really, other than people care, don't get me wrong, but Penn's not an exciting opponent. Throw a women's duel right before that out there, and get more people. Oh, you can't really get more than a sellout in the stands, but, get them there earlier, get them there, kind of like they did for when College Game Day came to Iowa City, and they opened the doors like an hour and a half, 2 hours early. Do that for wrestling. They did that at the Bout at the Ballpark a couple years ago. They had a bunch of national matches before Iowa and Oklahoma State, So I just think stay creative, and women's and girls wrestling in this state is growing, but yeah, I think right now, when you're comparing all of them, Iowa wrestling, when they're fourth in the Big Tens, that's a disappointing year for fans. Even though they're wrestling well for who they have, they're just not dominant, like we're used to them. It's kind of like any year Alabama football loses one game. Yeah. Their fans, once they lose that game, the season's over. Yep. That's kind of when Iowa's not competing for wrestling championships. It's kind of like that. And then, yeah, the men's basketball has been a little disappointing. They were okay, but not great. And right now, you're probably going to have a 1 seed for women's basketball. So I think women's wrestling though could get up there, but just got to keep pushing.
Be kind of neat, like they used to have with boxing. They'd have 3 or 4 cards, which I mean like 3 or 4 events leading up to the main event. It'd be neat to have that at Carver, where you had high school girls. Before, say it was a men's wrestling tournament against, I don't know, Michigan or someone like that. You had high school girls wrestle at Carver, and then you had the Iowa women's team wrestle at Carver, and then you had the main event, which was the men's.
That would be
give
awesome.
Exposure.
Oh, for sure.
But, guys, anything else before we get out of here?
Well, let me throw a quick idea. You both, what does women's wrestling need? They need a Caitlin Clark. They need a Caitlin Clark of wrestling, women's basketball. And unfortunately, the way things are set up, why did Caitlin Clark become so popular? Well, she had Angel Reese as a foil.
Yeah.
And it's like pro wrestling. You need a good guy and you need a bad guy. And we won't debate who's the good girl or the bad girl on this one, but you get that and your ideas about the ballpark and whatnot. Imagine a Indiana Fever exhibition game.
Yeah.
Simply to raise money for the hospital. Indiana Fever comes in next year. They play somebody. And then as that game is going on, because they only need a chunk of the football field, you set up mats on the other side of the field. And if you had women's wrestling mats, I mean, people would probably get up and leave, but they wouldn't leave in droves.
No.
And you set up something where you got basically a full Kinnick Stadium, and since it's the Indiana Fever, they could do that in Indiana. They could do that in other places, and you just cultivate an enthusiasm.
And you raise money for the Children's Hospital across the street.
Now, believe me, I don't want to be part of the people behind the desk marketing that. It's probably a logistic nightmare. But to promote the sport, and you could have the men's wrestle an exhibition match before the women wrestle. Just clean off the mat in a halftime or something of the Indiana Fever game on the other side. It takes that kind of creativity, though, to get it going. Yeah. And I've been around sports long enough to know that the people who market sports is just as important as some of the coaches sometimes.
Yeah.
So my final thing, Danny. So I'm in two kind of fantasy wrestling pools. So they're both different. So one, you have 12 guys. Okay. So you can't take the same seed twice. You have to take 1 through 10. Then you have 2 wild card guys, but they still can't be the same seed. So I have Chittum and Teskey right now as my 2 wild cards. Okay. And then I have a 1 seed through a 10 seed, and you can only get 1 guy per weight. So I'm in $20 in that one. So I'm excited for that. So my other one, it's kind of like fantasy football. So you get 1,000 points, and a 1 seed is worth 200 points. And then each seed below that, it's less points. So I'm going to say my team on here. So when I win, you guys all know, whenever we do our next episode, that I was legit, okay? So 125, I have 9 seed Patrick McKee from Minnesota. Cost me 60 points. 133, Aaron Ncaa from Penn State. He's my 10 seed. Sergio Lemley at 141 from Michigan. Tyler Kasich from Penn State at 149. I spent 200 points on Levi Haynes at 157. I have Dean Hamidi from Wisconsin because he's a 5 seed. Only cost me 100 points. My only Hawkeye, Patrick Kennedy at 174. And that was hard for me, but I feel like I never win these because I pick so many dang Hawkeyes. I have Bernie Truax, the 6 seed from Penn State at 84. Aaron Brooks is my other 1 seed because those guys cost me 400 of my 1,000 points, Haynes and Brooks, and I just feel like they're on the fast track. And then I have Colton Schultz from Arizona State because I feel like he's just a pretty good wrestler as my 4 seed at 285. So if there's a common theme here, a lot of Big Ten, tons of Penn State, not a ton of Iowa. And so I'm hoping this is the winning.
And a little bit of bias.
A little bit of bias, but I tried really hard to take as much bias out. So we'll have an update to see how I did here in a couple weeks in both pools.
All right. Thank you guys for joining us. That's going to do it here for the Wrestlecast this week. If you would like to drop us a line, you can do so at thewrestlecast@outlook.com. If you'd like to, or not subscribe, but if you would like to, subscribe to our channel, please do, and make sure and like our shows. And if you would like to advertise on the Wrestlecast, you can do so by contacting me at thewrestlecast@outlook.com. For Shane Barron and Gage Gill, I'm Danny Davis, and thank you very much.
That's it for this week's edition of The Wrestlecast. For questions on advertising on our program, or if you'd just like to drop us a line, you can do so at sportscastmedia@outlook.com. Follow Sportscast Media on Facebook, or go to our website at www.sportscastmedia.com. The Wrestlecast is a presentation of the Sportscast Media Network.